Hey there, friends. Welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on Unas TV. So let's talk about eminent domain today and the massive impacts it is having on people across the United States. This isn't just farmers, but a lot of the reason why I focus on agricultural and farming is because it became apparent to me years ago, now almost a decade ago, that we had a serious food supply problem that was occurring and has been exacerbating since that time. It's been growing. If you look at the number of ranchers in the United States, those who are producing cattle, it has decreased by 50% in the last 42 years, and it's accelerating. We've lost 21,000 cattle ranchers and farmers every single year for the past 5 years. There's only about 660,000 left, or 622,000. But if you think about those numbers, we have lost over 650,000 farmers and ranchers across the U.S., cattle farmers. That's just one part of the industry in 42 years. It's insane. It's incredible. Some of it has to do with drought. Some of it has to do with industry consolidation. And a lot of it just has to do with the simple fact that our government and our policymakers keep attacking our farmers and ranchers. I played a clip for you guys last week with Tucker Carlson and Pierce Morgan talking about how governments around the world have been implementing policies that attack farmers. Why? Why are we doing that? I mean, it seems inhuman to attack the one thing that we need to survive, which is food, but it happens. It happens on a daily basis. One of the things that I've talked a lot about on this channel is the development of artificial intelligence, the large capacity of power that a lot of these data centers require, a lot of the infrastructure that has to take place in order for this revolution, this next industrial revolution to actually happen. That's going to impact people not just in agriculture, but also people who just have a home somewhere and want to be left alone. If you live in Maryland, for example, a lot of people in Maryland are surprised at how much their power bills have recently gone up. They've gone through the roof. Maryland is one of those states that doesn't produce much. They have a horrible economy. Their legislature would rather spend time discussing things like providing condoms to elementary schoolers.
Good morning, Madam Speaker.
Good morning.
So House Bill 380 takes away the criminal penalties for putting condom machines in elementary schools. Here we are past the halfway point of a 90-day session, and this is the priority of the legislature, certainly of the majority party. Are we talking about how to make electricity bills lower? I haven't seen that bill come before us yet. Are we talking about all of the children that are stuck in failed schools that can't read or do math proficiently in accordance with state and federal tests? Oh no, we're not talking about that either. And I haven't seen those bills either. Are we talking about how there's not enough electricity on the grid in the state of Maryland, and no reasonably smart manufacturer or quantum computing company or data center would come to a state where there's insufficient power? Yet that's the governor's priority. We're not dealing with any of those issues. Instead, condoms for kindergartners. How shameful. That's the priority of this legislature? Really? Are you not getting the emails that I'm getting about electricity bills? This bill should really be about removing Empower Maryland from your electricity bill to save people money. Yet this is your priority. I agree with the young lady from Harford County. You aren't listening. You're not listening to the constituents. When this is your priority, you're not listening. For all those reasons, I'm voting no. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is there any further debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 89 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 380 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
Let your friends and family know that you defend the right to farm by buying a leather patch hat from Unasa Trading Co. We also have an array of Defend the Right to Farm t-shirts, Defend the Right to Ranch t-shirts. Make a statement, check out our collections, and support the channel. So what's actually happening in Maryland? Well, Maryland has been doing away with a lot of what they consider dirty energy, coal energy, and they've been trying to get their cleaner energy from other states. Ironically, a lot of the energy that they import. So Maryland imports about 40% of their energy needs. And of that, over half of it comes from coal. So they may have done away with their own energy production in the state of Maryland, but they're still getting it from dirty sources, or what they consider dirty sources. Maryland has also jumped on the bandwagon of these massive data centers. So I'm telling you this, so if you live in Maryland, think about this. These data centers do have a potential to increase revenue for the state of Maryland, but they don't have the power to supply the data centers. So then they put in this big, massive power line transmission corridor that cuts through family farms, cuts through family ranches, cuts through other people's land. And that's their plan, is they're going to import more power, but they can't even afford it. I think that a lot of these infrastructure upgrades benefit private corporations. If you think about eminent domain, what is eminent domain? No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Public use is the key word there. In 1997, there was a case that went to the Supreme Court. It was the case is known as Kelo versus the city of New London. Okay, so in this case, the Supreme Court made a decision that essentially changed the phrasing public use, or the interpretation of public use, to public good. There's a problem with this, because what is considered public good? What might be considered good for the public to you may not be considered good to the public to me. For example, I don't think that artificial intelligence is good for the public, and I don't think that the public has to have artificial intelligence. Somebody else might say, but artificial intelligence can help us heal people faster, can help us develop more medicines. I don't think any of that's good. So what we consider to be good for the public, the word good, it's an opinion. It's not necessarily a utilitarian use that has to happen for people to survive. The only reason why the government has the right to take your land is for public use. And that would have to be a necessity. Why does the public need to use it? Another thing that we've seen over the years with eminent domain is they've used it as a way to clean up slums. Well, these properties are degraded. We're going to take them by eminent domain from the poor people, and then we're going to hand them over to a developer and make it a really nice area. Most of the cases of eminent domain do not impact the public at all. Most cases of eminent domain impact large corporations, put money in people's pockets. This has been going on for a very, very long time. And I'm going to talk about some of these cases that are going on, because I want you to answer down below whether or not you think that this is something that is for the public use, or if this is an eminent domain case where private corporations are benefiting. What is for the public good anyway? What's your opinion on that? Public good. That could be identified as so many different things. If it's something like the public good, something that could be interpreted many different ways by many different opinions, it can't possibly be law. We can't base our society around something so erroneous. Okay, so in Georgia, the Fulton County Superior Court ruled in favor of, get this, a 4.5 mile railway. This isn't really a railway. What this is it's a convenience corridor for a few corporations that are producing goods and don't want to have to truck it around, which would probably take them about 10 miles, and they'd have to pay a trucker. But if they could put in this rail corridor, then their fees to ship it 4.5 miles to a larger rail station, then get it on the trains there, would be considerably less. The rail company makes more money because the rail company now has another corridor that they can charge people for shipping things on. A lot of this has to do with a quarry, but some of it actually does come from ag suppliers. There are some ag suppliers that are hoping to get this little rail spur I mean, I guess it's not I guess 4.5 miles is longer than a spur, but it's basically a spur off the main line to provide these private corporations with better access to the markets. Now, it's considered for the public good because they can lower their costs and therefore not pass them on to the consumer, which we all know never happens, right? They just become more profitable. They don't really lower the costs to the consumer. Why would they do that? So, this judge has basically made this ruling, taking a lot of farmland away from poor black farmers. And that's the truth of it. This is all the land that these people have. They've had it for generations, and it's now being split up so that they can run this 4.5-mile railroad through their land, completely destroying the value of the land that they have left, so that a few corporations, a handful of corporations, can benefit monetarily from it. But it's for the public good, right? Because if it makes their products more accessible to the market. They could hire more people if they're more profitable. They could lower prices if they really wanted to, but they won't. Personally, I do not see the necessity of the public in this particular case, but I'm curious what you guys think about it. Another example that I think is fairly interesting, and this is an example that is impacting 5 different states, okay? 5 different states, residents, farmers, ranchers in 5 different states are being impacted by this use of eminent domain. And some of these states are fighting back. Some of them aren't fighting back. Some of them have, quite honestly, been paid off by this corporation. And that's the Summit pipeline. And before I get into this, I know that Summit likes to send out letters to people who speak poorly of them saying cease and desist. In the Iowa Dispatch on December 13th, they actually had talked about how the leader of the Iowa Sierra Club, Jess Mazur, and a podcaster or just a broadcast media guy, Trent Luce, received cease and desist letters from Summit Pipeline for speaking poorly of Summit Pipeline and their projects. In my opinion, when there is something that impacts the public has the right to hear all sides of that story, all sides of that opinion. What Summit is trying to do is suppress information from getting out to the public if it opposes them building their pipeline. That is an attack on democracy. It's an attack on people. It's disgusting, despicable behavior. But here's the thing about the Summit pipeline. Some of you probably thought it went away, but it didn't go away. I mean, they've passed some laws in South Dakota making it harder for the project to proceed, but Summit is going to continue to fight this. The great thing about this pipeline, and the reason why it's so important for them to fight it and continue to see it through, is that they're basically building a pipeline to sequester carbon from ethanol plants under the ground, under somebody's farmland that doesn't want it, so that they can collect on taxpayer money in the billions. They're going to take billions of our money because it's good for the climate, and that's their argument, is it's for the public good. Now, personally, I disagree, and I was talking to a South Dakota farmer about this. Now, this is a South Dakota farmer who raises cattle, bison, grows sunflowers, corn, grains. He does it all, okay? And the first thing he said to me is that this entire process is absolutely ludicrous. And he made a good point, one that I concur with. And that is that if we were to rebuild our soil, which these farmers and ranchers are trying to do, this is a 4th generation rancher farmer, and he's very tuned into regenerative agriculture and trying to get as much carbon sequestered back into the soil as possible. Because of that, he's knowledgeable on this subject. He was like, there isn't enough carbon in the air to rebuild our soil, and yet they want to capture it and store it underground. How is that for the public good? It's not for the public good. And here's another thing about these carbon pipelines that nobody ever wants to talk about, or you get censored if you talk about. And that is that they're extremely dangerous. Yes, if you're going to transport carbon, it is safer to do it underground. It is safer to transport oil underground. It is safer to transport natural gas underground. It's safer in many ways to transport a lot of these things underground than rail. I mean, if you've been paying attention to the news lately, rail lines and airlines, stay clear away from them, right? So, I mean, there's some facts there that if you're going to do this, if you're going to take the carbon that we need, that us farmers need in order to rebuild our soil, feed our plants, grow food, the gas of life. If you're going to take that and store it underground somewhere, it is actually safer to transport it by pipeline. But when these pipelines explode, and this actually happened in Sataria, Mississippi, when these pipelines explode, they cause, they could kill people. That's the reality of it. Just ask people who are living in Sataria, Mississippi. Now, you can't talk about that because it's considered a, a tragedy. And so when you mention it, you get censored on YouTube. But I mean, unfortunately, this is something that actually did happen. It actually has occurred. There have been several carbon pipeline leaks and bursts over the years. And this is dangerous gas. It will literally suck the oxygen out of you and kill you. So I don't know. This is one of those cases of eminent domain where they're using the ecological theft of carbon, storing it underground, and claiming that it is in some way benefiting the public. And that it's what it's really doing is it's benefiting their pocketbooks because they're collecting taxpayer dollars to do this through one of the carbon sequestration acts or whatever it is. They're collecting money from us to do this, but they're trying to sell it on you. Well, it's going to help our ethanol producers because it will make them more competitive around the world. Guys, I'm pretty sure that around the world, things like the Paris Accord are pretty much dead. I don't think there's going to be any benefit to our ethanol producers to capture their carbon and store it underneath some farmer's land in North Dakota. This is completely ludicrous. And this company is extremely dangerous. I say that because anybody who tries to silence their opposition with threats and letters is dangerous. They actually tried to remove a publicly elected official in the state of South Dakota from being on a committee for making decisions on the permitting process for their pipeline because this particular person has family land that would be impacted by the pipeline.
All right, so thank you. New at 5:30, Summit Carbon Solutions is suing to block South Dakota Public Utilities Commissioner Christy Fegan from weighing in on its CO2 pipeline permit. Summit argues that Fegan's family owns land along the proposed pipeline route, which creates a conflict of interest. South Dakota is the last state holding out before the company can start construction.
But here's the thing is that person that was elected by the people of South Dakota was probably put in that spot because the people of South Dakota don't want their land being taken for a carbon pipeline. They wanted somebody in there who understands their position. And so this corporation, Summit Pipeline, actually went as far as trying to have that person removed. And yet this same corporation pays millions of dollars to election funds to try and get people elected. I mean, they're playing the game right back. They know what they're doing. I think it's pretty crazy when you look at what's going on with Summit Pipeline. I think the company is absolutely performing despicably with its threatening letters to people for speaking out against them. And nothing that they're doing is for the public good, but it does take public money. They're taking a lot of public money. That's what they're banking on. You know, and speaking of all of this carbon sequestering stuff, you've got a lot of these projects that have been popping up across the U.S., and these are going to compete with data centers. But you've got a lot of these projects, like I think there was like the one that's like the Bison Project or something like that. But anyway, what they're doing is they're using these giant air filters to capture carbon out of the air, sequester it into a brick, and then bury it underground.
We have reactors that are packaged into container-sized, shipping container-sized devices, and so we are building those containers in a factory and shipping them out to site and arranging them into arrays. When air passes over that material, it absorbs CO2. When that material is loaded, it takes about 30 minutes. We take that reactor offline, heat it up, and that releases the CO2, which is the product. And then that reactor is put back in service. So, we have hundreds or thousands of reactors operating in unison. So we have some that are always capturing and some that are delivering the CO2. ingredients for a direct air capture project is that you need access to land, and land that has the right geology for for sequestering the CO2, or a use case for the CO2. And then you also need to be partnered and have access to renewables as well, because direct air capture is a fairly energy intensive process. There is no real product, because ultimately what we're doing is we're doing disposal. And the product that we're generating is actually, through the way things are being monitored and tracked, it's actually a fiscal instrument. It's actually a carbon removal credit.
Ancient eras and natural selection have refined and tailored pristine fibers with the resilience for today's days. Evolving beyond the last ice age, bison wool is nature's most dependable activewear. Buffalo Wool Company, 100% proven by nature, 100% American made.
Check out the Buffalo Wool Company collection at yanasatradingco.com. Like I said, they don't want us growing any food. They don't want us having any access to the gas of life. They're literally going to suck the gas of life out of the air and store it in a brick and bury it under the ground, and then collect taxpayer dollars for doing it. And they can also get carbon credits from large corporations who need to offset their footprint. So they're out there sucking this stuff up, burying it in the ground. These machines take an incredible amount of electricity. We've been talking a lot on this channel about these transmission corridors, the massive transmission corridors going across the United States. I think a lot of that has to do with, within those corridors, they were planning on putting up their own turbines, their own solar panels, as well as connecting with private producers of electricity across the Midwest, and then transporting this power out to these locations. If you live in southeast Colorado, you're currently seeing the impacts of eminent domain with one of these large transmission corridors. The Delta Plains, I've had people leave some voicemails for me. I haven't been able to get back to them. I apologize. But talking about the movement ahead with a lot of the Delta Plains corridors. This is real stuff that's going on here. And a lot of it has to do with the need for additional electricity for data centers. AI increases our power needs tenfold, more than tenfold. But a lot of it also has to do with creating these giant machines to suck the gas of life out of us. It makes no logical sense. I mean, this is how senseless things have come. But it is all about profits. The entire green energy movement is all about profits. It's all about profits, taking people's land and shutting down farms. That's why they've been attacking farmers and ranchers over the last several years. They're all in their way. They're all in their way of being able to develop this incredible infrastructure that they think the world needs. But none of us actually need it. That's the thing is, would you be able to live your life tomorrow if you didn't have artificial intelligence? Some of you don't answer that. I realize our education system is crud these days. But for those of you who are capable of thinking, do you think you need artificial intelligence to get by? Is it a necessity in your life? Probably not. The other thing that these projects require is a large amount of water. And I've had somebody say to me, well, the mining in Idaho, it takes its water from Montana. So I slightly disagree with you on some of your points of that video. But where a lot of that is going is, in Idaho, you guys remember the big water situation last year where they cut off water to 6,000 farms because of basically the power company needing to get more water into the lakes to the rivers to increase energy flow and make more power, right? I mean, that was a big part of it. You also have data centers coming in that need more water, and they're moving into areas where they get surface water rights. So there's been this fight for water across the United States. You've literally seen in like Nevada and some areas where developers have bought the water rights and then sold them to cities, townships, and large corporations that are putting in data centers. Down in Texas, they're literally taking people's land through eminent domain to build another big reservoir that they don't even need yet. They don't need it yet. They haven't even proven that they would need it in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, but they're going to do it anyway because they might need it. It kind of reminds me of the Attorney General of New York suing JBS because JBS might not meet their climate goals in 15 years? I mean, at what point in time can we justify taking people's land or suing a corporation because of something that might happen in the far distant future? I don't think constitutionally that falls within Article 5 of the Constitution, or the Fifth Amendment. I think that you'd have to prove that there is a necessity, a need. Now, down in Texas, we all know that they're actually trying to turn that into like the artificial intelligence mega center of the world. You know, what gets me though is that a lot of this artificial intelligence, a lot of these needs that these guys have, they don't have to ship power through your land across the United States to get it to these centers. They don't have to do that. They could put in their own, small but effective power facility on these campuses to power these data centers. It may not be 100% clean energy. It might be natural gas or something like that. And no, I don't want a bunch of nuclear power plants all over the place, but that is cleaner energy, a little bit of water vapor, which is actually a pretty potent greenhouse gas. But my point is with natural gas, with other traditional energy sources, a lot of these corporations that are trying to put in these data centers, they can build their own power generation. I think water is still one of the biggest things, and that's what I think we're seeing down in Texas, is they're setting themselves up. In Virginia last year, we talked about a farmer who lost part of his land because they wanted to put an intake on the river of his property, and they offer him pennies on the dollar for what waterfront property goes for. They wanted to put an intake and then pipe it all the way across the county to a data center development. Somehow they said this was for the public good. To me, it sounds like to the corporation good. So we're still seeing, across the United States, Colorado, Missouri, Maryland, basically everywhere you look, the Delta Plains, which is multiple states, Texas, eminent domain being used for a lot of these projects. And even though a lot of these transmission corridor projects are no longer considered national interest transmission corridors, a lot of the money, I mean, there are rumors of tens of billions of dollars being pumped out of the last administration in its last month into a lot of these projects. So the money is there, the funding is there. They just have to convince the state to use eminent domain. And so these projects are moving ahead full throttle, taking up our farmland. And what nobody seems to care about is the fact that food prices are going through the roof. The amount of farmers and ranchers that we have, not just in the cattle industry, but across the entire spectrum, it continues to plummet year over year. So, logically speaking, we have a problem. We have less and less food production year over year. Even if you look at the numbers of the U.S., other than corn and soybeans, we've seen a massive decrease in vegetable production. We've seen a massive decrease, especially with some of these incredibly powerful, unusual storms like Helene, the loss of citrus in a lot of areas. A lot of crops have been wiped out. And yet we continue to put our primary focus on this next industrial revolution of artificial intelligence, which is just literally sucking the resources out of the environment. And somehow it's related to, the green movement. I haven't been able to figure that one out. I'm still trying to pinpoint how it connects. Point is today I wanted to talk about some of those cases of that we hear about in the news of eminent domain being used. I know Missouri is fighting pretty hard, and a lot of states, there have been some great politicians putting forward some great Bill of Rights in those states for their citizens to protect them from these types of cases, but it's happening all across the United States. It's happening on a daily basis, and none of these, in my perspective, could be determined for the public use. It's not like we have to have those big high voltage transmission corridors to feed our houses. In fact, we don't even have to have those corridors to feed our houses. You could power your house off of solar today if you wanted to. Like, none of this is a necessity. But, they've changed this interpretation to the public good. And in my opinion, what we need to do is go back to the Supreme Court and have them reevaluate some of these decisions and say, hey, look, you know what? The Constitution doesn't say anything about the public good. Who defines the public good? Is whose opinion counts and whose opinion doesn't count when it comes to the public good, right? Eminent domain should only be used to take people's land in the event that it is necessary for the public use. And if it's not necessary, if it's just determined that it's something for the good of the public, that's something that we should take into consideration because it's gotten out of hand. It's gotten out of hand and it's allowed these big corporations to go out and literally suck the resources dry out of our agricultural communities. I mean, that is what is happening. These water shortages, all of these issues, they're sucking us dry. Anyway, guys, stay tuned, stay safe, stay off trains and stay off planes. I will be back on here the next day or two. Every day, more and more Americans are waking up to the fact that our society is simply unhealthy. We've been being fed poisons and being told to put poisons on our body by corporate America for years. A lot of the things that we've been told were bad for us, like animal fats, are actually good for our bodies. Your skin is the largest organ of your body. If you want to take care of yourself and you want to help nurse yourself back to health, it's important to take care of every aspect of your body, which is why on Yanasa Trade & Co., we're pleased to offer you guys bison tallow lotions and creams. These bison tallow lotions and creams are amazing. They're not made by a big corporation. They're made by a homesteader, just like you guys, our friends out of Canada, Dr. Nathaniel and Susan Ostashowski. If you've watched our travels over the years filming Native, the prodigies of an icon, we've visited numerous bison ranches and farms and parks across the entire continent of North America. And these are some really great people who have come up with some really great products. And you can buy them on Yanasa Trade & Co. and support this program and support your health all at the same time. Get yourself some bison tallow products from Yanasa Trade & Co. and support this program and support other small farmers like yourself. We hope to continue to grow our product lines on Yanasa Trade & Co. and I hope you continue to support us.